The first episode of this anime begins with Jill running away from a group of guards. Exhausted but determined, she refuses to surrender and attacks them, declaring that even if she perishes, she must ensure her enemy dies. Fueled by anger, she insists that her enemy will not mock her. Gerald, a boy who appears before her, tells her that her time is up and she will be executed immediately instead of tomorrow, as originally scheduled. Jill, filled with memories, recalls the night Gerald proposed to her, claiming to love her from the moment they met. Initially, she found him sweet, but she soon learned of his true nature. In the present, Gerald expresses disbelief that the woman who is supposed to be his wife refuses to admit her crimes and runs away. Jill argues that the accusations are false, but Gerald is fixated on how the situation affected his sister, Ferris, who he holds above everything else. When asked how Jill escaped, she proudly responds that she overpowered the guard who relied too much on his strength. Gerald grabs her by the hair and tells her that had she remained loyal, she could have lived a long life, raising his children. But now, he feels it's better that she won't have the chance to pass on her traits to their offspring. Gerald orders the guards to take her away, but Jill manages to escape and attacks him with a sword, failing to kill him before fleeing again. She climbs to the top of a tower and defiantly tells Gerald that he didn't abandon her, she abandoned him. She then leaps from the tower. Gerald orders his guards to shoot arrows, and he hurls a spear at her. When Jill tries to stop the spear, she finds it impossible, as if it has a will of its own. Determined not to be defeated, Jill recalls her past decisions, lamenting that everything would have been different if she had made better choices. As the spear pierces Jill's body, the clock strikes midnight and she dies. However, something strange happens. The clock starts spinning backward, and time rewinds. Jill wakes up to find her parents, who had passed away, alive and in front of her. Shocked, she realizes she is no longer in the present, but in the past, right before Prince Gerald's 15th birthday. Jill, her father Lord Serval, and her mother arrive at the royal capital for the birthday celebration. Jill is stunned to see that Gerald is only 15, as he should be 21. As she enters the ballroom with her family, Jill becomes overwhelmed and terrified when she sees Prince Gerald again. She quickly excuses herself, telling her parents she needs fresh air. Outside, Jill reflects on the past, looking at the palace that hasn't changed. She notices Princess Ferris' bedroom and recalls how her engagement to Gerald was merely a cover for his forbidden love for his sister. When Jill discovered their incestual relationship, she broke off the engagement, which led to her being falsely accused and sentenced to death for attempting to poison the princess. Standing on the balcony, Jill questions whether this is reality or a dream. She is baffled by her return to the past, her parents being alive, and her younger self. She wonders if this is an opportunity to fix everything. At that moment, Prince Gerald enters, and Jill, anxious and sweating, tries to avoid reliving the painful future. Gerald approaches her, intending to express his admiration, but Jill, desperate to escape, excuses herself and rushes back to her parents. As Gerald follows her, Jill panics and lies, claiming she has fallen in love at first sight with the person standing behind her. To her horror, the person behind her speaks, and Jill recognizes the voice. The man expresses his happiness and declares that he will make her his wife. He introduces himself, asking for her name, and upon realizing she is the daughter of Margrave Serval, he comments on her significant magical power. Jill realizes that, although this man is a prince, her decision was completely wrong. She remembers that 6 years from now, this man will unleash his overwhelming power and madness, plunging the kingdom into a sea of fire. He is one of their greatest enemies, the cursed emperor of the neighboring lands. The cursed man then introduces himself as Hades. Hades accepts her offer of marriage, leaving Jill completely shocked. Her face reflects utter disbelief, as if she were burning inside. Later, Jill wakes up in an unfamiliar room, wondering where she is and if this is a room in the royal palace. As she rises and looks out the window, Hades appears behind her, checking on her. He kneels before her and proposes again, expressing disbelief at what happened earlier and wanting to confirm that it wasn't just a dream. Jill, lost in thought, realizes that this impression of Hades is completely different from the one she had of him in the future. She recalls how, in the future, Hades ordered his men to slaughter everyone, men, women, children, and elders with a deliberate cruelty. He instructed them to gouge out eyes in front of mothers, cut off fingertips, and force siblings to kill each other. His goal was to leave no trace of hope, love, or dreams, destroying everything. Jill had urged him to lay down his weapons and withdraw his forces, as their enemies would eventually surrender. In response, Rafi, Hades' future self, used his power to strike her down for issuing commands to his army. She pleaded for him to torture her instead, but he cruelly mocked her, promising that she would one day regret her words. However, Jill, fueled by anger, declared that she would never retract her statement. Eventually, Rafi lost interest and ordered his forces to retreat. The story then flashes back to when Jill was younger. Rafi asks her how she's feeling and whether she's made a decision about the marriage proposal. When Jill remains silent, Rafi tells her not to feel pressured. He offers her the choice to lie down, or if she chooses to stay awake, to put on her shoes to avoid cold feet. He then gently places her shoes on her feet, which embarrasses Jill as she is treated like a lady despite her inexperience in such situations. At that moment, Gerald bursts in, angrily demanding to know what Jill is thinking, accusing her of running away when he tried to talk to her. Rafi silences him, telling Gerald not to pressure a young girl like Jill. Ignoring him, Gerald questions Rafi's presence, to which Rafi replies that it's only natural for him to be concerned about his fiancée. Gerald, outraged, declares that Jill is not Rafi's fiancée and that his parents never approved of it, that he reveals that he himself is the one planning to propose to her, as the decision has already been made between their families. Gerald then insists that Rafi stop interfering in their kingdom's affairs. Rafi mocks Gerald, suggesting that his frustration stems from rejection. Turning to Jill, Rafi tells her they should talk elsewhere, as they can't have a comfortable conversation here. Gerald snaps, ordering them not to move, but Rafi calmly leads Jill out, warning Gerald not to confront him, as he could never defeat him. Gerald, intimidated by Rafi's power, does nothing as they leave the room. As they wander through the palace, Rafi apologizes to Jill for scaring her and assures her that he won't let anyone harm her. He tells her that this won't deter Prince Gerald, as love and conflict often go hand in hand. He also explains that her magical energy is still unstable, so they will travel by ship to his empire. Rafi promises that with his magic they can reach his empire in just a few hours. On board the ship, Rafi gives Jill new clothes, and she feels some relief at having escaped Gerald, though she knows the situation isn't over yet. Later, during tea, Rafi uses his magic to summon a large cake, which delights Jill. Jill, overjoyed by the delicious cake, eagerly starts eating. As she enjoys the treat, she asks Rafi how serious he is about their engagement, especially considering the significant age difference between them. Rafi responds that the arrangement is ideal. He explains that her immense magical power makes her exactly the kind of woman he's been seeking. He expresses disbelief that she came to him and offered marriage, assuring her that his plan for a perfect, happy family will not be disrupted by something as trivial as the age difference. Jill becomes angry, feeling that Rafi has taken what she views as a child's joke too seriously, so seriously that he kidnapped her. Upset, Rafi demands to know if the marriage proposal was a lie. He insists that he needs to understand her true intentions, asking Jill directly if she really wants to marry him. Jill, feeling guilty, apologizes and explains that certain circumstances led to the proposal and that, yes, it was originally meant as a joke. At that moment, a small dinosaur appears, laughing at Rafi. The dinosaur mocks him, saying, "I told you she's young. She proposed to me after our first meeting, so of course there were other reasons behind it. You're the only one who could get so excited and believe such a thing so easily, you incompetent romantic." Furious, Rafi snaps back, threatening to serve roast dragon for dinner that night. So seriously. Rafi acknowledges that it's unlikely for a young girl with immense magical power to suddenly develop feelings for a man like him, but he vows to repay her kindness someday. He assures her that he will never forget her name and promises to return her to Kree, where all that awaits her is the obsessed prince and her grim fate. Jill, reflecting on the chaotic events, realizes she had forgotten about the consequences of her actions. She remembers that she made the proposal to take advantage of Rafi and planned to discard the offer once it no longer served her purpose. However, after observing Rafi's genuine nature, she reconsiders. Turning to Rafi, Jill says she takes back everything she previously said. She expresses her sincerity now and tells him she truly wants to marry him. She vows to take responsibility for her words, promising to move forward without backing down, and assures him that this time she will keep her promise to make him happy. That we then see Jill apologizing to King Hades and promising that she will never break her word to him again. She vows to dedicate her entire life to making him happy and fixing everything. Surprised, King Hades asks her if this means he will actually have a wife. Jill replies that it will happen one day, but asks for their marriage to be in name only for now since she is still young. Overjoyed, King Hades picks her up and tells her he doesn't mind if it's just a name. He promises to take good care of her and prove his sincerity. He then kisses her hands and asks the small dragon, Rafi, to bless Jill as his wife. Rafi uses his magic, and a dragon's marriage ring appears on Jill's hand, symbolizing the emperor's wife receiving the dragon's blessings. King Hades explains that as long as she wears the ring, they are engaged and she is his wife even before the official wedding ceremony. Suddenly, their ship is attacked and King Hades, growing tired, asks Raffi to take Jill to the harbor to protect her. Jill refuses, deciding to protect the king instead. Using her power, she lifts the entire ship and throws it away from the cannon fire, then strikes one of the bombs, causing it to explode at a safe distance. So they eventually reach the harbor and Jill informs the soldiers that King Hades is aboard and needs medical attention. As Emperor Hades is taken to be treated, Jill speaks with Raffi, who thanks her for saving the king. He warns her to lower her voice, so the soldiers don't think she's talking to herself, reminding her that only she and Hades can see him. Then, a girl named Sapphire appears, asking about the Emperor's condition. A soldier reassures her that he is being treated. Raffi tells Jill that Sapphire, the daughter of Lord Markabelt, is her rival for Emperor Hades' love and a candidate to be his fiancée. Sapphire approaches Jill angrily, calling her a little girl and accusing her of trying to steal the Emperor. She vows not to let Jill have him, calling her a horrible thief before storming off. Later that night, Jill reflects on a future tragedy she knows about. During a banquet celebrating the Emperor's return from Kredos, Sapphire would kill the other candidates and set the palace on fire, sparking a civil war. Jill worries that if this happens, it will lead to conflict with Kratos, and she doesn't want to lose her family, homeland, or soldiers. Raffi appears, asking what's wrong. He warns Jill that dwelling on the situation will only make her depressed. Jill asks about the Emperor's condition, and Raffi tells her that Hades has woken up and asked about her first thing. When he learned that Jill had met Sapphire, he became very worried for her. Suddenly, King Hades enters the room, dressed in servant's clothing, holding pastries he made for Jill. She is shocked and scolds him for acting like a child, reminding him that he is the king. Hades grins and feeds her a pastry, and when Jill finds it delicious, he teases her, saying that she can't reject him now and that they'll be bound together by crescents forever. Jill becomes angry, slaps him, and asks why he came. Hades explains that he wanted to see her and informs her that he has ordered soldiers to escort her to the imperial capital once he recovers. Jill wonders if Marcus Bell ignored Hades' orders and if he might be behind the ship attack. Hades replies that if Marcus Bell is rebelling, he must be brave to challenge the cursed emperor. Jill then asks if the rumors about Hades being cursed are true. Hades admits that the situation is difficult for him, but he wants Jill to love him. Raffi intervenes, saying that Hades tends to stumble over his words, suggesting they leave the matter for now. Hades continues, explaining that he wasn't always in line for the throne. His mother was a concubine, so he was sent to the borderlands as a way to remove him from the royal court. His mother thought he was frightening because he could see Raffi when no one else could. Hades recalls that strange things started happening on his 11th birthday. His older brother, the crown prince, suddenly died of illness, followed by the next crown prince drowning in a bath and another committing suicide. All the crown princes died in bizarre ways, one after another, every year on Hades' birthday. Eventually, Hades was summoned to the capital and made the crown prince, but shortly afterward, his father disappeared, and on the day of his coronation, his mother killed herself. This series of tragic events led to him being labeled the cursed emperor. Hades concludes his story, leaving Jill with a full understanding of the dark and twisted circumstances surrounding his rise to power. Raffi clarifies that he wasn't the one who cursed the Demon King. The Demon King then explains that his brother convinced everyone to support him, and as a result, things have been relatively peaceful for now. Jill reflects on the future, remembering that the informant who will provide her key information will be Prince Viziel. He will accuse the Emperor of murdering his elder brother and half-siblings, but none of them will survive. Despite knowing this, Jill reminds herself to stay calm. Returning to the present, Jill speaks to the Demon King, asking him if he feels the way his family and the Empire treated him was unfair. The Demon King responds that he doesn't know, but he accepts his role as Emperor. He explains that these are his people and his family, and denying that would mean surrendering to fate. He's already come to terms with his losses and reassures Jill that the curse is no longer a concern. He says that having a wife like her is more important, and they should be able to live peacefully for at least 3 years. However, Jill senses he's hiding something. She acknowledges that he has many enemies and asks him how he plans to deal with them. The Demon King replies that if Marquis attempts anything, he will crush him completely, though he prefers not to use violence unless forced. Jill offers to handle things, confidently stating that she's smart enough to take care of it. Suddenly, the Demon King collapses from exhaustion but assures Jill that he's fine. Despite the serious situation, he cheerfully mentions wanting to bake cakes and bread just for her. An attendant warns him not to overexert himself, reminding him not to end up bedridden again. Raffi thanks the attendant, expressing that he feels like a younger brother to the Demon King. The next day, Jill, disguised as a young man, walks through the streets and overhears Princess Tucker talking to a priest in a church. Sappho is certain that the person in question is Emperor Hades, but she's unsure why there is any doubt about his identity. She confides in the priest, saying that her father, Marquis Bell, seems concerned for her since she's a candidate to become Emperor Hade's fiancée. However, Sappho notes that Hades prefers his fiancées to be younger than 14 and she's already 16. Jill contemplates what to do with this information and whether to inform Raffi. She then overhears the guards talking about sending a signal to close the gates, realizing that they plan to capture Sappho. Soon after, soldiers enter the church to arrest Saphir. Jill, initially hesitant since she was only there to gather information, decides to intervene and enters the church. Meanwhile, Raffi is in his room when Marquis Bell informs him that an unknown force has taken over the seaport. The attackers are reportedly under the envoy Raffi brought from Kouryakuchuu, and they've taken Bell's daughter, Saphir, as a hostage. Bell plans to send special forces to rescue her. Raffi asks about his fiancée, which irritates Bell, who accuses her of being a spy. He blames himself for the port's fall and requests that the northern forces not withdraw from the city immediately. Raffi agrees but warns that if his fiancée is innocent, he will take appropriate action. Back at the church, Saphir and Jill are thrown into a cell after the guards discover Jill's true identity as a girl. The guards celebrate, knowing that capturing Saphir is a major achievement. Saphir angrily reminds them that she's Marquis Bell's daughter, but the guards tell her to stay quiet. Saphir, however, remains confident that Emperor Hades will come to rescue them. Jill listens as Saphir recounts her story. Her father asked her to consult the priest about Emperor Hades, someone to whom she owes a great debt. She lost her mother at a young age, and after her father remarried, she was sent to live elsewhere but didn't fit in. She often escaped to a place where dragons rested, and though she didn't understand their language, she felt a connection with them. Saphir explains that after Emperor Hades ascended the throne, he asked to meet her. During their first meeting, he asked if she saw something on his shoulder, but she couldn't see anything. Her parents scolded her for this, saying her answer was wrong and that they had to repay the money used to send her there. However, Hades protected her, and that's why she wants to help him. She confessed her feelings to Hades before he left for Kratos, but he rejected her because she wasn't under 14 years old. Listening to this, Jill is disillusioned with Hades, feeling that his rejection tarnishes everything good about him. Saphir continues, explaining that she started to think Hades used that excuse to disregard her feelings, especially after he brought a younger girl from Kratos. Jill considers helping Saphir, but knows that both her father and the priest are involved in the schemes. If they escape, Jill risks being labeled as the leader of Saphir's kidnappers. Jill concludes that her only option is to expose the Marquis schemes in front of everyone, but she's unsure how to achieve that alone. Just then, Zeke and Camilla enter the prison, arguing with each other and blaming one another for the chaos. Jill recognizes them and they are surprised that she knows them. Camilla reassures Jill, saying she's like a big sister to her. Jill recalls a past connection and begins to cry, telling Camilla not to be scared of Zeke, even though he looks stern. Jill reflects that in 6 years she will lose so much, but now she realizes that nothing has been taken from her yet. For the first time since traveling back in time, she knows everything is still in the future, and she resolves not to lose anything this time. The story continues with Jill and Miss Saphir in a cell, surrounded by strange people who are talking to themselves. Jill stands up and tells everyone to be quiet because Miss Saphir is frightened. Using her powers, Jill breaks the chains on her hands and then frees the others in the cell. Everyone is shocked and wonders how she did it. Jill brushes it off, saying it's not important right now. What matters is figuring out their next step and stopping the fighting. One of the prisoners explains that after gathering information, they discovered that savages had disguised themselves as northern soldiers, infiltrated their ranks, lowered the gate, and separated the town from the port. They also took the Marquis Bill's daughter hostage and seized control of the port. Another prisoner asked why they would disguise themselves as northern soldiers, who were supposed to defend the port. The first prisoner replies that while she knew the Marquis hated them, she never expected this kind of action. Then Saphir tells the group that all the turmoil was caused by the girl named Jill, the one brought by the Emperor. The imprisoned woman says that things are starting to make sense. She predicts that the Marquis Bill will send his own soldiers to quell the disturbances, but after they defeat the savages, he will realize that the northern forces are no longer needed and ask them to leave Belberg. If Jill truly incited these events, it will reflect badly on the emperor, especially if Miss Sappho dies. The Marquis will rise to power and do whatever he pleases. The woman then points out something strange. The girl who supposedly caused all this chaos wasn't in the room where she had been locked up. A guard adds that he was guarding Jill's room when the savages came in, repeatedly asking about the girl. This confuses everyone further. Why were the savages looking for the girl they were supposedly working for? They decide that when the Marquis Bill's forces arrive, they will blend into the chaos and leave the empire, ensuring they never tell the emperor anything. Saphir, however, states that she will inform the emperor. She urges the others to escape and hide while she remains, as it won't be easy for the savages to kill her due to her close relationship with the emperor. If they can't find the spy, they will need her testimony as a victim, and she will find a way to inform the emperor, who won't ignore something like this. Jill reflects on this plan and thinks to herself about Camilla and Zeke. She doesn't fully understand their motives for coming to Kratos, but if they get involved and Miss Sappho helps them escape, Sappho will be left behind while Camilla and Zeke flee. Sappho will die, carrying the shame of her father. This is the full backstory behind the murder-suicide incident in Belberg. Jill then removes her hat and addresses everyone, revealing that she is Jill Serville, the girl they've been talking about, the one accused of being a spy and causing the incident. She explains that she is trapped just like them, but the enemy doesn't know her location yet, giving them a chance to win. She suggests that they rescue the imprisoned northern forces, protect Miss Sappho, and retake the port from the traitors. Camilla agrees, noting that clearing the northern forces' name will expose who planted the suspicion that Jill was a spy. Zeke adds that if they succeed, the Marquis will be able to stay silent. They both support Jill's plan. Jill then turns to Miss Sappho, asking for her opinion, as the mission's success hinges on her survival. Jill urges Sappho to officially accuse her father and promises to protect her, warning that if she doesn't, she will be discarded one day. Sappho asks Jill why she is trying to save her, given that they are rivals in love. Jill responds that she has no intention of falling in love with the emperor. They are engaged due to certain circumstances and will likely marry in name only, without any real feelings for each other. Sappho hints that she could still try to betray the emperor. Jill calmly explains that despite the marriage being in name only, they chose each other for a reason, and there's no need for concern. She also made a promise to herself to make the emperor happy. The scene shifts to Emperor Ravi, who is speaking to his personal dragon. He expresses his concern for Jill's safety, emphasizing how important she is to him. Ravi notes that Marquis Bill is trying to escalate the situation, but he sees Marquis Bill as nothing more than a disposable tool. He intends to use this opportunity to get rid of what's no longer necessary and bring Belberg under his direct control. As for Miss Saphir, Ravi remarks that when her father dies and the Belberg family collapses, she can die of heartbreak afterward. The story shifts back to Jill, who reassures Miss Sappho that she is on her side, just like the emperor. Sappho begins to cry, telling Jill that she believes her and agrees to officially accuse her father. Jill promises to protect her with all her strength. Everyone is astonished by Jill's confidence and maturity, noting that she seems far older than her actual age. Jill then tells the group that they need to act quickly before the Marquis arrives. One of the prisoners asks about the first step to obtaining weapons. Jill responds that they will leave the cell and free the imprisoned northern forces to bolster their numbers. A blonde soldier informs Jill that the northern forces are being held in a church and that many of them are injured. Jill instructs him to lead the way. Camilla and Zeke offer to guard Miss Sappho, but they ask Jill how they will escape from the cell. Jill surprises everyone by saying she will destroy the wall. She strikes the wall with her bare hand, causing it to explode like a bomb. Jill then rushes toward a soldier who is about to harm the hostages, striking him in the head. She quickly deflects another soldier's shot and delivers a powerful blow to him as well. Soon after, her friends arrive, apologizing for the delay, and they help tie up the enemies. Also guys, if you are enjoying my videos, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more anime recaps. The story continues with Jill speaking to the injured soldiers, introducing herself as someone sent under the Emperor's orders to save them. She informs them that Marquis Bill orchestrated the attack and set a trap to capture the northern forces and weaken the Emperor's power. Jill also reveals that she has been falsely accused of being a spy, and that Miss Sappho is being used as a disposable pawn in the scheme. She urges the soldiers not to let these cowardly and savage acts continue. Jill tells the soldiers who can still move to form a barrier and prepare for the enemy's attacks. She addresses the injured, reassuring them that their wounds are marks of honor and that there is no shame in them. She praises them as great warriors, telling them that even if they die, they will be martyrs on the battlefield. Jill continues her motivational speech, encouraging the northern soldiers to hold their heads high. She tells them that this is the moment they've all been waiting for, the moment to liberate the port and restore their honor with their own hands. Her powerful words inspire the soldiers, and they begin chanting her name, seeing her as a leader, even resembling the head of an army. The scene shifts to Emperor Robbie, who is preparing food. He speaks to Hades, praising Jill for her incredible actions, noting that she escaped using her powers and is now fighting the enemy. Hades is surprised and asks what's happening. Ravi explains that Jill and the northern forces are protecting Miss Sapphire in a church and repelling the enemy under Jill's command. The soldiers believe the Emperor sent Jill to rescue them, and she gave them a speech about fighting under the Emperor's banner. Robbie then tells Hades about Jill's actions during the fight. Hades expresses concern about the town's damages, but Robbie assures him that the fighting is confined to the port. Hades, though still worried about potential losses, decides that the costs of rebuilding can be taken from Marquis Bill's wealth. He believes it's better to take that route than destroy Bill's noble family. At that moment, 2 guards sent by Marquis Bill arrive, asking Hades to leave for safety because traitors are on their way to the castle. Hades refuses, realizing the guards are trying to block his path. He informs them that the northern forces are about to reclaim the port unexpectedly. The scene returns to Jill and the northern forces, who have just finished a fight. Jill orders them to return to the church, where they begin defending and fortifying the windows and entrance under her direction. At this point, Hugo, the enemy commander, arrives and offers the northern forces a deal. If they tie up and hand over the spy, he will withdraw from the port. If they refuse, he threatens to burn down the church. Faced with this threat, the soldiers turn to Jill for guidance, unsure of what to do since reclaiming the port now seems impossible. Jill decides to confront the enemy commander herself, despite objections from those around her, who remind her that she's still a child. Jill doesn't listen. She asks Camilla to bring her a rope and instructs the soldiers to protect Miss Sapphire in her absence. Jill devises a plan, allowing herself to be tied up and then handed over to the enemy. The guard takes her out and informs Hugo that they've agreed to the deal. Hugo, seeing Jill, is surprised that the supposed spy is just a little girl and assures his men they won't attack her. However, he starts preparing for an escape, telling his men they don't have time to kill everyone. Suddenly, Jill uses her magic to attack Hugo, showing immense strength. She captures him and orders his soldiers to retreat, threatening Hugo's life. Hugo shouts that Jill is bluffing and tells his men to kill her. Jill strikes him down and commands his soldiers to surrender. Just then, a messenger arrives, announcing that all their ships have been destroyed. Furious, Hugo questions Jill, accusing her of sinking their ships. Jill confirms it, declaring that their escape is now impossible. In a different part of the city, we see an old priest preparing to kill the princess, but Camilla intervenes, stopping him and mocking the situation. She remarks that a priest attacking others with a knife must signal the end of the world. They capture the priest and head outside, where Zeke sarcastically offers his condolences to Hugo, pointing out that the princess is safe and sound. Hugo, realizing his defeat, asks for his men to be spared. Jill demands to know who Hugo is working for, and he reveals that it's Marquis Bill. Marquis Bill soon arrives on the scene and kills most of his own soldiers. He approaches Jill, recognizing her as the girl who deceived the Emperor, and comments on her youth, yet acknowledges that she is clearly a sorceress from Kratos. Jill calmly welcomes him, informing him that the northern forces have already defeated the savages and retaken the port. She adds that he is too late. Marquis Bill, however, insists that he's arrived just in time, claiming that all he has to do now is eliminate everyone. Suddenly, Hades sees a dragon flying toward the castle through the window. He tells Robbie that they need to go to Jill, and he plans to save her from the dragon and protect her. The enormous dragon lands in front of Jill, who tells everyone to retreat into the church. The dragon attacks, but Jill, realizing that if she dodges the church will burn, stands her ground. Marquis Bill is shocked and orders the dragon to attack. However, Hades, standing on top of a nearby building, declares that the dragon can't act because the one standing in front of it is the Emperor of Dragons. The episode ends with this tense confrontation. The episode opens with Emperor Hades declaring that he cannot leave his wife behind as he seeks refuge in a secure place. He then approaches Jill and asks how she is. Jill assures him she's fine and expresses her happiness that he's concerned for her. Hades then asks how things went at the seaport. Jill explains that the news of the port's capture was a deception by the enemy to distract them, and that she and Miss Sapphire defended the northern forces and secured the port. Suddenly, Belle, angry, accuses Jill of being a spy, warning Emperor Hades that the enemy is still present at the port. Bel advises the Emperor not to leave the palace and offers to justify Jill's presence as merely being exploited by the enemy. Jill retorts, calling Bel a coward and challenging his accusation. Emperor Hades then approaches one of the soldiers, seizes him by the neck, and greets him sarcastically, commending him for his efforts in the northern forces. The soldiers are surprised that the Emperor knows their names, to which he explains that he believes an emperor should know his soldiers personally. He orders them to share any information they have about the mastermind behind the attacks. The soldiers, recognizing his authority, kneel before Hades, and one soldier, Hugo, informs him that Marquis Bel is behind the scheme. Hades approaches Bel, strikes him, and places his head under his foot, warning him that he's as good as dead and has lost the right to speak. He reminds Bel of his previous warning that if Jill was innocent, he would be held accountable for his crimes. Hades contemplates various punishments for Bel, wondering whether to execute him by fire, torture, or to hand him over to Bilberg. In the meantime, Miss Safer, fearful for her father, finds comfort from Jill, who assures her that the Emperor will spare him if he cooperates by handing over Bilberg and confessing his crimes. Bel, however, mocks the Emperor, questioning whether he is capable of mercy, especially given his reputation for having driven his mother to suicide. He asks Jill if she would intervene to prevent the Emperor from executing an enemy or support the punishment for the kingdom's greater good. Bel sneers at Hades, taunting him by asking how many people had to die for him to become emperor, accusing him of being despised by the empire. Hades acknowledges that this may be true, but asserts that he is the emperor, whether people like it or not. He then orders the soldiers to take Bel away for interrogation, demanding they learn everything they can from him. Later that night, Jill wanders through the palace corridors, uncertain of where to go. A dragon named Raffi appears, asking if she is lost, and guides her to her room. Jill inquires about the servants, to which Raffi explains that this palace once belonged to Marquis Bel, and his servants are now too terrified to be of any use. Jill then asks Raffi about the Emperor, and Raffi shares that while the Emperor may seem foolish at times, he is actually very aware that he must avoid appearing weak or naive. Raffi goes on to explain that Hades always had the hidden potential to be emperor, but his typical demeanor makes it difficult for others to see his true abilities. He's working to restore order without relying on fear. Jill remarks that if Hades continues like this, he may become numb to his own emotions and those of others. Raffi agrees, noting that the Emperor's limited social interactions have skewed his sense of closeness, and his extreme desire to break his curse has led him to believe it will earn him love. Jill suggests that they could help the Emperor learn to connect with people, perhaps by encouraging him to be more approachable. Raffi, sensing her feelings, asks if she truly likes the Emperor. Jill clarifies that any romantic connection is impossible at this point, and that their relationship is strictly one of mutual benefit. Finally, they reach her bedroom, and Raffi informs her that she and the Emperor will be sharing the room for security reasons. Surprised, Jill questions if the Emperor is actually inside. Raffi confirms, pointing out that they are married, so it is natural for them to share a room. Jill entered the room to find Emperor Hades asleep on the bed, completely unaware of her presence. He had drunk quite a bit of wine, which clouded his mind and was harmful to his health. Seeing his high temperature, Jill poured water on him to wake him up, bringing his fever down from 40 degrees Celsius. As he began to regain consciousness, she comforted him and brought some fruit for him to eat. Surprised, Hades asked if she was caring for him. She replied affectionately, saying, "How could I not take care of you? You're my husband." He thanked her, expressing that having her by his side was more valuable to him than any remedy. Then he requested some apples. Jill took a knife to slice one, though her technique was rather unusual. Laughing, he commented on her clumsiness, lifted her onto his lap, and with her face turning red, demonstrated the proper way to cut the fruit, expertly peeling the apple. Impressed, Jill asked him to shape a few slices into little rabbits, which he did easily, much to her amazement. Jill praised him, calling him a genius, and he humbly explained that everything becomes easy with practice. She took a slice for herself and smiled, noting how charming he looked. Hades, however, grew slightly annoyed when she mentioned that he reminded her of her little brother, as she had come from a large family. He objected, asserting, "How could you compare me to a younger brother? I'm your husband, which means I'm your love and your friend." Jill then confessed that she had yet to tell her family about their marriage. She thanked him for rescuing her from the savages that day, adding that although he could have punished them as emperor, he had chosen not to. Hades replied, explaining that he hadn't done it because he knew she despised violence and executions. "Saving my wife and my love is only natural," he said. Jill then expressed her concerns, telling him that if anyone dared to insult or belittle him, he should put them in their place. Hades, touched by her love, realized the affection in her gaze, and his face turned red, just like the apple they had been sharing. He teased her, saying it seemed she had fallen in love with him, but she countered that she treated him like a younger brother, which left him both surprised and slightly exasperated. Feigning coldness, he moved away from her, claiming he felt a chill, though it was only an excuse. Then he quickly pulled her close, reassuring her that love between spouses was normal and nothing to feel shy about. He added playfully that if she hadn't fallen for him yet, he was tempted to uncover everything about her. As they continued talking, Jill eventually fell asleep. Her young age under 14 and her strong magic, which even allowed her to see the dragon Rafi, became apparent to him. Hades only wished to experience the feeling of love without demanding anything more. The next day, Hades sat with Jill, enjoying a perfectly cooked roasted duck. He shared some with her, and she delighted in its rich flavor. He also discussed their marriage arrangement, suggesting that if she agreed, Camilla and Zeke could be under her command. However, Jill remained firm in her decision not to separate from him too soon, fearing the loneliness that might come if they parted abruptly. Hades then asked about the snacks she had while waiting, reminding her that her family would be eagerly waiting for her back home. Hades instructed his guard to bring sweets into the palace, but the guards declined, choosing to stay by his side to observe Jill's care for him. They were supportive, encouraging her throughout. When the tea session ended, Alyssa asked the guards to stop interrupting her and the Emperor, but one guard hinted that the Emperor's support was her only authority, suggesting that he was fully in her favor. Alyssa replied that there was no formal agreement between her and the Emperor. They teased her, remarking that frequent gatherings with him might raise his hopes, and another guard added they would always stand by her side. Zeke remarked that she could ignore such childish flirting, and Jill admitted that it was her first experience with romantic gestures, leaving her uncertain of how to respond. She clarified that she had no intention of introducing love into their relationship since they were preparing for marriage, and if romance were allowed, she wouldn't feel able to scold the Emperor if he ever made mistakes. Zeke pointed out that it was a rather blunt way to view their relationship, and Camilla added that both Jill and the Emperor were still quite young. Jill, in turn, reflected that she had brought both Camilla and Zeke into her world from a different era. Determined to avoid repeating her past mistakes, she resolved to make better choices this time around. Zeke then noticed her dragon ring and asked if that was what it was. Jill confirmed, noting that she couldn't remove it, and speculated that the curse could be real. She mentioned that the Emperor had suggested the curse would calm if she stayed close to him. Camilla responded that such legends always have a trace of truth, affirming the likelihood of a curse. Jill, startled by the conversation, expressed her unease, and Zeke reassured her, asking if the legends in her homeland of Kratos were different. Jill explained that long ago, dragons had different views on their relationship with humans, leading to a conflict. One side wanted to protect humans out of love, while the other preferred to rule them through logic, ultimately dividing the lands into Kratos and Jaravi. Zeke then spoke of how a curse had left the land barren until the Dragon Emperor married a woman with powerful magic, creating a magical shield around Jalrakia that protected it from the curse, forming their current borders. Jill, amazed, was surprised to learn that this legend existed beyond Kratos. At that moment, Princess Saphir arrived, delivering a letter to Jill that she claimed required immediate attention. Jill, shocked by the familiar handwriting, dropped the letter, which floated away. Emperor Hades caught it, expressing his admiration for the dedication of the crown prince who had written it, stating that he was preparing for a grand welcome celebration and had accepted Jill's love challenge. He concluded by saying, "Love is war," leaving everyone intrigued. Prince Gerald and his soldiers board a ship heading for the port of Bilberg. A guard informs him they are near, and Gerald decides to investigate himself to see if Jill has truly married the dragon. Meanwhile, Camelia's friend wonders what Gerald plans. Though his visit is unofficial, it is unexpected and they are unprepared. Camelia remarks that discussing future relations with Jill there would be insulting. Just then, Jill arrives with Shavar, who encourages her to smile. Jill insists she has no reason to look happy. Shavar suggests a strong woman should appear joyful, but Jill says she will wear a hidden weapon when meeting Gerald because she despises him. Shavar urges Jill to show Gerald that she is treated well, which she can do through her expressions. Jill then goes to Emperor Hades, who compliments her appearance. He explains that Kratos claims he kidnapped her, hoping to prove his innocence. Jill's face grows serious as she admits she is worried about the enemy's attack. She believes Gerald's true goal is control. She assures Hades she will protect him. As they walk together, Jill expresses frustration for lacking a pleasant smile, only desiring to spill Gerald's blood. The Emperor teases her gently for thinking of Gerald instead of him, suggesting he could attend the meeting alone. Jill protests, saying he cannot clear the accusations alone. The Emperor refuses, and as they argue, he picks her up, asking her not to hate him. Jill promises, but slaps him when he moves closer. When they meet Gerald, he notices the slap mark on Hades. The Emperor explains it was from his jealousy, which caused Jill to hit him. He apologizes for not reaching out to the Surveil family sooner, hoping to avoid more accusations. Gerald questions Jill's loyalty, reminding her she was once engaged to him. Jill responds that the Emperor needs her. Gerald warns Hades that if Jill fails to protect him from the curse, his subjects may see him as cursed. A guard interrupts to report the death of Marcus Bell, possibly by strangulation. Jill later learns Marcus may have hanged himself in custody. The news spreads, fueling fear about the Emperor's curse. Jill suspects Gerald might be spreading this fear. Camellia reminds Jill of a magical shield they once discussed, explaining it angered the underworld when it blocked the curse. Since the curse couldn't pass through the shield, it transformed into a black spirit and asked to be brought there. Camellia also describes a sacred spear passed down through the Grado royal family. Once thought to be a legend, the spear was taken to the Revi Empire, where it was offered to the Emperor and his dragon wife. The dragon wife claimed the spear was cursed and sacrificed herself to break the curse, destroying the shield and freeing the land. Sivir suddenly appears, acting strangely and revealing the cursed spear. She attacks Jill, but Jill dodges, realizing Sivir is possessed by the spirit of the Dragon Emperor's wife. As they fight, Emperor Hades arrives, recognizing Sivir's cursed state. Just as Sivir nearly kills Jill, the Dragon King Heido intervenes, wanting to destroy the cursed spirit. Jill suggests an alternative. Though Heido insists on destroying Sivior's fate, Hades orders his soldiers to round up the local women to prevent further curses, commanding they kill anyone who resists. Jill warns him that using force will only increase fear of the curse. Hades refuses her caution, explaining that any girl over age 14 could become a vessel for the curse. He tells Camellia to isolate Miss Sivior to protect her. Frustrated, Jill reflects on Hades and their connection, feeling conflicted about her loyalty. Later, she finds Hades and offers to heal his injured hand. Though he resists her kindness, she expresses frustration that he avoids intimacy, hindering any chance for a genuine bond. Suddenly, guards report a fire in town, and Hades leaves to confront rioters, ordering Ravi to keep Jill safe. The guards report that townspeople convinced of the curse are rioting and trying to storm the palace. Jill watches Hades leave, but Ravi reassures her that within the barrier, she is in the safest place possible. Jill tells the dragon Raffi that they are in the safest place, a barrier where no one can hear them from the outside. Meanwhile, Camilla and her friends watch the city burning from above. One of her friends comments that things are unfolding as the leader predicted, reminding Camilla of Jill's words about starting the fire to turn the town into a sea of flames. Camilla tells her friends they won't succeed since the whole city is already burning. One of them reassures her, explaining that the fire will die down before anyone is harmed. He mentions the controlled fire plan Bill had discussed and wonders if the Elder is still alive. He also speaks of a group in black hoods stirring up the town's people who are heading for the palace to rescue the Emperor. Camilla decides to stop them and orders her friends to protect the Emperor. She spots Marquis Bill and the Crown Prince among the crowd. Back with Jill, she pleads with Raffi to let her go protect the Emperor. Raffi assures her the Emperor is safe and can defend himself. He reveals that Jill is the magical shield protecting Emperor Hades. Jill realizes that if she marries him, it might deter Kratos, but Raffi warns her that Kratos would kill her if he found out. Jill asks why she is being confined, and Raffi tells her about the sacred legends, explaining that Kratos will always pursue her while she wears the dragon's wife ring. Jill grabs the sword Raffi transforms into and declares she will fight. She insists they have no time to waste and warns Raffi of the future, full of war and betrayal. She pleads for his help, promising that if she fails, he can end her life. Raffi agrees and they break the barrier to save the Emperor. Meanwhile, Emperor Hades watches his people's rebellion from the palace balcony. He questions his purpose, but remains confident that Raffi will try to save the country. When the castle bells ring, Jill appears, holding the sword, and vows to protect the Emperor from Kratos. She promises to expose Kratos' role in the fires and curses if the Emperor condemns her. Hades calls to Jill from the palace, asking her to come down, unsure of what will happen. Jill tells him to remain silent and wait, frustrating him as she seems to have forgotten his position. He warns her that if she continues recklessly, he might strike her. But Jill remains unfazed. She understands his true desire is a happy family, and she believes she can help him achieve it. Suddenly, Kratos appears, and Jill charges at him, starting a fierce battle. Kratos attacks her relentlessly. Fueled by bloodlust, Jill creates multiple copies of herself, each throwing swords at Kratos. In defense, Jill casts a magical barrier to shield herself. The townspeople below watch in awe. Hades steps in, reinforcing Jill's barrier and breaking apart the swords aimed at her. Though it drains his strength, the fight continues. Jill attempts to strike Kratos' main body but can't identify it among his duplicates. She proposes they fight woman to woman, prompting Kratos to dismiss the copies and form a single sword. Jill questions if Kratos even remembers her, since this is only their second meeting. Kratos coldly asks why she should remember, shocking Jill. She recalls that Kratos rewound time and pauses, realizing the significance. Kratos demands to know why, of all people, she would become the dragon's wife and insists she hand him over. Jill remembers a similar situation from her youth, but back then she had no control. This time, she won't let Kratos take him. Drawing on all her strength, Jill shatters Kratos' sword, declaring he must never pursue another woman's husband. The battle ends, and Jill, drained of magic, faints. Geralt catches her as she collapses. When Jill wakes up, she finds herself in his arms. Geralt tells her he will take her back with him, believing she will accept his sister. Jill, angry, refuses. Geralt threatens to kill Camilla and Zeke if she doesn't comply. Just then, Hades strikes Geralt, sending him to the ground. Hades catches Jill before she falls, and she thanks him for saving her. Geralt attempts to kill Hades, but Hades restrains him. Geralt asks if Hades plans to declare war on his kingdom. Hades calmly replies he won't, and he will never use his wife as bait again. Instead, he says he will confront Kratos himself. He warns Jill that if she appears in her weakened state, he will invite her to fight him directly. Hades seals Geralt in a crystal and banishes him far from the kingdom, saying he never wants to see him again. He reminds Geralt that they come from different worlds, meaning their destinies don't align. Jill asks where she will go, and Hades believes she will end up near the Orakia Mountains. The next day, Jill tells Hades she didn't do anything special to be considered amazing. Hades replies that seeing her protect the town calmed everyone. He then tells her he wants to marry her. There are other things he should say, but for now, his heart is full, and those are the only words he can speak. Jill thinks to herself that this man will use her as bait, but she has no choice but to acknowledge it. She agrees to his proposal, saying it's just a hassle. Later, at the palace, Hades says he thought he would die, adding that killing the Dragon Emperor is a crime. Jill responds that she thinks he's to blame for not hearing her before his heart stopped. Jill dreams about a girl who turns out to be the first princess of the Rafi Empire, named Alinja. In her dream, Alinja recognizes Jill as Crown Prince Gerald's fiancée and asks for confirmation. Jill responds, explaining that the princess will be taken as a prisoner of war, but promises that her soldiers' lives will be spared if they surrender. The dream abruptly ends as Jill wakes up. The next scene takes place in the morning, where Prince Hades brings Jill dragons, explaining that they are a gift from his brother. Jill is overjoyed, as she has always dreamed of riding a dragon, but then recalls that dragons are known to dislike magical power. One of the dragons, Rafi, reassures her that they only dislike evil magical power. Jill wonders if others can see the dragon, but Rafi informs her that only humans can see him. A small creature named Sudi then emerges from Jill's bag. She explains that she had obtained the prince's permission to have Sudi accompany her. Later, some villagers come to assist them but are too terrified of the dragons to approach. Jill calms their fears, assuring them that dragons are intelligent and gentle creatures. Prince Hades discusses plans with Jill, telling her that someone will be sent from the capital once the necessary arrangements are made. Until then, she is to oversee the area. Jill agrees, and soon, they take off on the dragons. The villagers wave goodbye as Jill praises the prince for protecting the place. During the flight, Jill enjoys the experience, but the others are uneasy, frightened by the height. By evening, they set up camp. Jill and the prince share a conversation, during which she learns that he is the middle child of 7 siblings. He reveals that most of his siblings died because of a curse and laments how people look down on him because of it. He warns Jill that she might face similar disdain. Jill reassures him, vowing to protect him, just as she once demonstrated her strength by breaking a spear to win a fight. As their journey continues, they spot the capital in the distance. They are captivated by its beauty but are suddenly attacked by magical defense barriers targeting the king's dragon. Jill leaps into action to defend against the barriers. However, a knight appears, injuring Jill and draining her magical energy with his sword. Just as the knight strikes again, Prince Hades intervenes, saving her. In the skirmish, both Jill and the prince are injured and fall to the ground. The knight, revealed to be Hades' uncle Jorg, taunts them, calling Hades a monster and accusing him of ruling as a false emperor with a fake heavenly sword. Jorg declares that he has already informed the kingdom of Hades' supposed deception. Jill defends Hades, proclaiming him the true emperor, but Jorg dismisses her, stating that it is a family matter. The attack continues, but they barely escape, thanks to Rafi's intervention. Exhausted, Rafi collapses, leaving them to seek refuge. That evening, Jill tends to the prince's wounds in a hidden shelter. Hades reflects on the situation, lamenting the unexpected use of the hideout and hoping the enemy does not discover them. He shares that a dragon's nest lies nearby, a dangerous place even Rafi avoids. Jill is surprised that even a dragon would fear such a location. Hades comforts Jill, reassuring her that her actions were correct and that his uncle's weapon was beyond anyone's anticipation. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admits his fear and thanks Jill for enduring the hardships with him. Their moment is interrupted by Camilla, who insists they need to find a safer place. Hades then reveals that the area borders Kratos, a land ruled by a ducal family. This family is known for its neutrality, but the prince shares that one of their heirs died on his birthday, an event attributed to his curse. Despite the bleak circumstances, Hades expresses hope that the heavenly sword will regain its power in 6 months, and that Jorg's sword will eventually break under its immense power. A month passes uneventfully as the group focuses on survival. Frustrated, Jill pushes for action, criticizing their passive approach while the enemy tightens its hold on the capital. She confronts Camilla, seeking support, but is stunned when Camilla expresses enjoyment of their rural lifestyle. Even Zeke agrees, further aggravating Jill. Adding to their challenges, they discover wanted posters with their faces displayed across the region. Jill is furious as she points out that their group includes someone who will be arrested the moment they step outside. She announces that the commander of the Dragon Knights has returned after completing an assignment elsewhere. Adding to her frustration, she explains that Jorg has gathered the 3 dukes and the top officers in the capital to reveal the heavenly sword. She speculates that he has likely ordered the lords of every region to search for her. Frustrated, Jill exclaims that while they waste time planting vegetables, Their chances of staying hidden are rapidly diminishing. She demands to know what they plan to do if they are discovered the next day. The others merely shrug and argue that there's nothing they can do at the moment, citing a lack of money, connections, or resources. They even laugh, which only infuriates Jill further. In a fit of determination, Jill declares that she will take matters into her own hands. She announces her plan to join the Dragon Knights as a recruit. Even without her magic, she believes no one can defeat her. She reasons that rising through the ranks will provide them with money, connections, and valuable information. She storms out, leaving the others in silence. Zeke follows her, admitting he's also bored and ready for a change. Jill and Zeke eventually arrive at a town that Jill notes as the stronghold of Duke Neutral, one of the 3 great dukes. She wonders aloud if the Dragon Knights are based there, and Zeke confirms that they are an elite force. Jill observes the crowds gathered in the town, likely aspiring to join the Dragon Knights. As they walk, they notice a wanted poster of the prince. Jill comments on how unflattering the picture is, joking that they could have used a better one. The sight of the poster prompts Zeke to recall the king's words to him. Hades had instructed Zeke to protect Jill, acknowledging her intelligence but noting her lack of experience in navigating the Empire's complexities. Hades had emphasized her youth and stated that he would not stand in her way or risk her hating him. He had even told Zeke that, if necessary, Zeke should hand him over to Jorg to ensure Jill's safety. Zeke had been shocked by the king's willingness to sacrifice himself, fearing betrayal within their group. Returning to the present, Zeke notes that the posters only feature the prince, with no mention of the rest of their group. Jill asks if Lady Safer might be safe, to which Zeke responds that they have no choice but to trust her. Jill suggests they grab a good meal before moving on. Suddenly, they hear shouting and discover that the Dragon Knights have been deployed on an urgent mission. They come across a group of knights arguing with a soldier about the delay as a massive dragon appears and begins attacking the town. Without hesitation, Jill jumps into action, rescuing a knight and advising him to start evacuating people via the southern roads. She grabs a sword to confront the dragon. The knight warns her that the weapon won't pierce dragon scales, but Jill calculates that aiming for the softer areas inside its legs might work. She manages to injure the dragon, but it doesn't react, leaving her confused. Moments later, the commander of the Dragon Knights arrives, riding a small dragon. He reveals that the entire incident was a staged test. Jill and Zeke are stunned by the revelation. Jill points out the damage to a fountain during the fight, but the commander explains it had already been scheduled for demolition. He also reveals that the dragon Jill faced is one of the Dragon Knights highly intelligent and trained for such exercises, demonstrating immense trust and discipline. Meanwhile, Emperor Hades observes Jill from a distance. He confides in a young woman beside him that Jill will be his bride, praising her sweet and charming nature. When the woman asks if he had intervened to stop the dragon, Hades admits to doing so, but asks her to keep it a secret from Jill, fearing she might question the fairness of her test results. The woman then asks why Hades doesn't use dragons to reclaim the capital. Hades explains that it would be illogical, especially with Raffi's power waning and the Empire's magical defenses weakened. Suddenly, Hades hears a mysterious voice saying, "I'm alone." Startled, he quickly turns, but when the woman questions him, he brushes it off. The scene shifts back to Jill and Zeke. They are approached by the same young woman, who introduces herself as Alentia Tios Raffi, the first princess of the Raffi Empire and the commander of the Dragon Knights. Jill recognizes Alentia as the girl from her dream at the start of the episode, the one who had taken her own life. Warmly, Jill greets Alentia, and the two exchange pleasantries. This brings an end to our episode. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel for more such videos. The next day, Hideo gives Jill supplies while Camilla watches. Before leaving, Kingly instructs a rooster not to mess with His Majesty's mind and greet her politely. Jill and Zeke continue their journey, with Zeke advising her to stay low-key since things will get tougher. In a city, a vendor thanks Jill with a piece of fruit. Meanwhile, a commander addresses recruits, explaining they'll meet dragons to test compatibility. The red dragon, Rosa, appears, and the commander explains dragon ranks by scale color. Silver is the highest, followed by black, crimson, orange, yellow, green, and brown-gray. Eye color also matters, with gold being the highest, Only the Dragon King, Rava, has silver scales and golden eyes. Jill realizes Ravi is Rava, but laughs at how silly he acts. The commander explains that a knight's rank depends on the dragon. She points out the recruits' blue badges and says dragons judge them accordingly. Rosa rejects recruits until Jill approaches. Rosa suddenly attacks Jill, who dodges. The commander calms Rosa, and Zeke carries Jill away, worried. Everyone wonders why Rosa reacted so strangely. Later, Jill returns home feeling useless and unworthy of being a dragon knight. She believes she's a burden to Hideo. Hideo comforts her, saying setbacks are normal, and admits he loves her for who she is, asking her to be his wife. Jill surprises him by confessing her love, and he blushes. She asks for her favorite meal, and Hideo happily makes it. Jill vows to make him happy. During dinner, Jill mentions wanting to see a black dragon with golden eyes, saying its colors match Hideo's black hair and silver eyes, like Ravi. Ravi, in disguise, overhears and asks why. Jill says it would suit his majesty perfectly, leaving Hideo flustered and muttering his love for her. The next day, Jill heads to the War Guild for her assignment, patrolling the town. At Fountain Square, she meets Lawrence, a skilled adjutant she recognizes from her past. Lawrence realizes Jill's name matches the daughter of Margrave Surveil, making her flustered. She changes the subject and they patrol together. Lawrence explains the dragon bonding process and patrol duties for recruits without dragons. He mentions unrest in the capital and how lords delay action, waiting for power shifts. Jill notes no search teams are investigating. Lawrence says the Duchy of Neutral prefers to stay out of conflicts and believes the selection process for Dragon Knights isn't random. He then hints that he's heard rumors about Jill. Jill argues that rumors ruin accurate information. Lawrence mentions a rumor about why Commander Alenze of the Neutral Duchy hasn't led the search. Suddenly, a man arrives with an urgent message for Alenze. He introduces himself as Ryuutei, the second prince of the Wrath Empire. Ryuutei takes them to Alenze, who warns him not to act recklessly. Annoyed, he jokes about her treating him like a pest and complains about the tea, claiming he provides better tea for the Dragon Knights. Jill notices their casual banter and how close they seem. Ryuutei asks who he should ally with. Alenze mentions a student who seeks his protection, but warns that revealing her truth might force him to act against her. Ryuutei explains their uncle has claimed the throne, causing unrest, and says either their uncle or Hades holds the celestial sword, lost for 300 years. Alenze realizes Ryuutei believes Hades is the true Dragon Emperor. Jill overhears and feels uneasy. Ryuutei mocks Hades for marrying a woman of questionable origin, calling it foolish. Alenze explains they can't support Hades, despite his legitimacy, due to family ties with the Neutral and Leerzot's duchies, bearers of the three great houses' legacy. Ryuutei agrees, promising not to oppose Hades, but refusing to support him. Jill interrupts, and the commander apologizes for Rosa's earlier aggression, explaining the dragon viewed Jill as an equal. Ryuutei offers to protect Jill, saying Rosa wouldn't object. The commander agrees, and Ryuutei takes Jill with him. On their walk, Ryuutei shares stories of his time as a dragon knight. As they walk, they meet Zeke and other knights. Zeke jokes about Jill's lack of household skills, but praises her swordsmanship. Jill feels happy and thinks he's kind. Nervous, Jill wonders about Rosa's reaction. Rosa stares, but walks away. He notes Rosa acted similarly only when meeting Hades Ravi, his brother. Ryuutei confronts Jill, asking who she really is. Later, Jill returns home, looking upset. Hades notices, and Zeke asks about her assignment. Jill says they're working separately and preparing cabbage for Zeke instead of letting Hades cook. Suddenly, Ryuutei appears, exclaiming he's found them. Shocked, he asks what they're doing. Hades casually says he's harvesting vegetables. Ryuutei gets angry, urging him to lead the resistance. Jill explains Ristyard isn't an enemy, thinking it's better he found them first. Hades snaps, yelling that he's been abandoned and now spends his days cooking and waiting for his bride. Ristyard calls him childish and storms off, declaring this place the new imperial capital and claiming himself emperor. Zeke wonders if they can leave their simple life behind. Jill, determined, says she'll make it happen, even if she has to force Hades to act. And that's the end of today's episode.